was a teacher of social work in the 1970s who actually taught a course called Racism 101. My mother taught me what is today the woke line on how race works, and the things that she taught me were correct. And I have, to this day, never voted Republican. I am a Democrat. I am a liberal. I always say I am a black liberal of about 1960. But I found as I came of age that as I analyzed the socio-political things happening around me that concerned race, that I didn't agree with what was supposed to be the default kinds of assumptions. And I found that my assumptions, which I think would have, endeared me thoroughly to the NAACP in 1960, were considered repulsive, inappropriate, naive, or conservative.
Okay, I found this video, Jordan Peterson, how anti-racism is hurting Black America. He's talking to this guy. Let's take a listen.
Hello, everyone. I'm pleased today to have with me Professor Dr. John McWhorter, who teaches linguistics, American studies, and music history at Columbia University, is contributing editor at The Atlantic magazine, and hosts the language podcast Lexicon Valley. He's the author of over 20 books. That's a lot of books. Some on language and some on race. Most recently, the best-selling 9 Nasty Words, which was released in early 2021. And because one book a year isn't enough, he's coming out with a new one called Woke Racism: How a New Religion is Betraying Black America. That should cause a lot of trouble. That's out October 26th. He has produced 5 courses on language for the Great Courses series and appears regularly with Glenn Lowry in a podcast about race issues, The Glenn Show. I first encountered Dr. McWhorter at an Aspen Ideas Festival gathering in 2018. I was being interviewed with Barry Weiss, and afterwards he asked me a rather difficult question. I'm very pleased to have you come and agree to talk to me today, and I'm very much looking forward to our conversation.
Me too, Jordan.
So I'm going to start by revealing my ignorance. What I don't know about linguistics could fill a lot more books than you've written, even though you've written many. And so I'm curious about why if you could provide the watchers and listeners with a description of the field and its relevance, and also perhaps why you got interested in it, attracted by it, enough to devote your life to it.
Mm-hmm. Linguistics is a cover term for an awful lot of perspectives, but it's not about translation, and it's not about learning how to speak languages. It's about analyzing language as a scientific object. And a lot of it is a lot like biology. And so we analyze how language changes. What are the physiological processes that allow us to produce language and that allow us to understand it? How is it that children learn language? There's a certain magic that anybody can perceive in the way it happens with so little explicit tutelage. Linguists study that. And there are all sorts of other applications. There is linguistics and how to teach a computer to understand and even produce language. There is language and the social sphere, language as part of a culture's anthropology. What probably would surprise many people for very understandable reasons is that what I just mentioned is not my main focus. I can talk about those things on TV, so to speak, because the general public is very interested in those things. But I'm actually a language change, language contact nerd. What interests me is why a language is different now than it was 500 years ago, and what happens when languages come together and create new languages and how that process operates. But when you do linguistics in the media, you're expected to be kind of chief cook and bottle washer. And a lot of what is discussed in the media by linguists is what we call sociolinguistics, which is great stuff. There are people who really specialize in it. I'm just a popularizer of that particular subfield. But that's a quick cook's tour of what linguistics is and what in the world I'm doing in it.
And so what are your thoughts on that remarkable facility of children to learn language? I read, I think it was the Russian psychologist Vygotsky made a claim. He had this hypothesis he called zone of proximal development, which is, I suppose, the psychological place you are when you're learning something new and are engrossed by it, something like the idea of flow. And Vygotsky said that adults naturally speak to their children at a comprehension level that slightly exceeds their current grasp. They seem to do that automatically, even though that's an unbelievably complex thing to do. And that drags children along, to further the development of their language. So it seems deep and instinctual. And what are your thoughts on propositions like Chomsky's, that there's something like a biological mechanism, a specialized biological mechanism that underlies our ability to learn language and to produce it? Is that also under your purview?
I wouldn't call it under my purview, but I find it very interesting to watch, kind of like you rubberneck at a car accident. The idea that there is a universal grammar that we're born with and that underlies all languages is utterly fascinating. Only a true genius such as Chomsky could have come up with it. But the odd thing is that when you actually try to find what these universal grammar specifications are that could plausibly be encoded in our genes and be subject to natural selection, frankly, since the 1960s, I think most people who practice that way of looking at things would be hard put to tell those who aren't in the club what has been discovered, what we know now that we didn't know then, what would be useful for people in other fields to know. I find it to be a subfield of true geniuses treading water. And a lot of them would not want to hear that. And they're going to say that I don't know enough about it to say it. But, frankly, I think I do, because I pay a lot more attention to what they do than many people might think. And I'm always wishing that more would come out of it than does. And so I don't think it's that there is a grammar tree of some sort, even if encoded in some abstract way, that people are born with. The evidence of that wonderful notion simply hasn't been borne out. But it's obvious that there is some sort of genetic specification for the acquisition of and the use of language, because if there weren't one, we wouldn't be the only species who do it. There's clearly something, but I hate to say whatever it is much less interesting than there being this very intricate and suspiciously computer science-like universal grammar in our brains. Now, Vygotsky is always very interesting, and what he's getting at is that humans learn to talk when people around them are chattering away in such a way that, for example, an adult learner of the language finds absolutely confounding. You just listen to this stream of things going by, even if you've been carefully instructed in the language. It's that grand nexus of frustration. And so certainly acquisition is not teaching children word by word by word, but acquisition is also not children filling out some sort of sentence parsing grammar that they were born with. It's something that's much less precise than that. Nevertheless, what's amazing is how universally it works. All cognitively normal human beings learn to speak fluidly, fluently, idiomatically, and without effort. Obviously, that's programmed in some way.
Well, you see, one of the things that's quite remarkable, if you look at people who are quite intellectually impaired, so people who suffer from Down syndrome, for example, they also pick up language extraordinarily well, and that's very remarkable. So,
isn't that neat? Yeah.
It's really something. There are autistic kids have trouble with language, and autism, especially in its more profound forms, is an extremely serious neurological condition. But it really is remarkable that something as cognitively demanding as language, and specialized to human beings as it is so deeply embedded in us that even intellectual impairment in many cases doesn't interfere with its acquisition.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's clearly localized in certain ways. And the Chomskyians have talked about a language organ. And I don't think they necessarily mean that it's in any one place, but it's clear that there are certain parts of the brain where language is generated, that where language ends up, even if those parts of the brain didn't evolve for that purpose. And they can be doing their job, even if the person is quite impaired cognitively, which shows that language is a thing in some way. The question is exactly what that thing is. I think linguists are getting closer to that now than they ever have, because we're learning more.
I wonder, I have another scientific question, I guess, is one of the psychologists that I had the good fortune to know at Harvard, whose name I unfortunately forget, was a social psychologist very interested in the idea of basic level categorization, which was a concept I hadn't come across. And one of the things he told me and had worked on was the notion that objects in the world, nameable objects in the world, pop out at us at a certain level of resolution. So, for example, a child will learn the very short word cat, which is a pointer to an individual animal rather than the more generic species level, what would you say, perception. And I wonder if the grammar of language, in some sense, is that Chomsky was searching for, is some sense secondary consequence of something more like a perceptual grammar. Because, one of the things AI researchers have been confounded by since the early 60s is the fact that the world is very, very difficult to perceive, much more difficult to perceive than we thought. And yet it arrays itself in front of us in all of these nameable and graspable objects. And so maybe the grammar is embedded, the linguistic grammar is embedded in the act of perception in some sense, and then there's a linguistic scaffold on top of that. I don't know if that's an absurd idea, but
of course, there is labeling, for one thing. Just the fact that after a while, a child learns that cat is not just the cat in the house, but has this concept of cat to which you apply the label cat. That's something that human language does to an extent that's unprecedented anywhere in the animal kingdom. There's a quantum leap. But then what you're saying seems to be true. If my money were on it, I would say that one universal perceptual specification that there might actually be genetically set in our brains is a difference between roughly nouns, verbs, and qualities, what we call adjectives. And so there's some things that are more likely to be labeled by a language as nouns, like a cat. There's not going to be a language that has a verb that is to be like a cat or, to purr, etc. It's going to be a cat. And there's certain things that are more likely to be encoded as actions, and there's certain things that are more likely to be encoded as qualities, such as colors. Those three things are the bedrocks. Now, once you get to prepositions and adverbs and prefixes versus suffixes, all of that is up for grabs. Those things tend to be epiphenomenal upon the very basics. But yes, a universal grammar probably does entail. I think all linguists think there's a difference between nouns and verbs. Some very few languages seem to contravene that. They're the exceptions to prove the rule. And then there's also qualities. And then beyond that, there are many different schools of thought.
And you think that's fundamentally a separation between something like things and actions?
Yeah, that seems to be one of the very basic things, right down to certain brain structures that seem to be sensitive to it. There's a difference between an action and a thing, and the brain seems to be ready for that. That might have something to do with what we might call a UG, a universal grammar.
So now I read, and it was on Wikipedia, so that's another indication of my ignorance, that you're also known. Yeah, well, fair enough. If you need to get informed about something quickly. That's a great source. Yes, exactly. Definitely. Yes. And isn't that fantastic for all of us? That you're also known as a critic of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which is really not their hypothesis at all, but it has come to be known by their names nonetheless. And that hypothesis, correct me if I'm wrong, is, in its strong form at least, the notion that language structures thought to such a degree that speakers of different languages have qualitatively different thoughts in some sense. And that isn't something that sits particularly well for you. And I think there are also some political and practical implications of that belief, and also the criticism of it. Is any of that off base, or? No,
that's quite on base. The idea that the language that you speak gives you a certain pair of glasses that you see the world through is very, very attractive. I remember learning it when I was an undergraduate about the Hopi Native Americans, and it's something that you want to be true. But the evidence just doesn't support it if you look at it in terms of lots of languages and what the implications of this would be. And so certainly language does influence thought in certain ways. It's been shown, for example, in Russian. It's hard for us to even imagine this unless we're Russian. There's no word for blue. They have a word for dark blue. They have a word for light blue. There is no word for just blue. And it turns out that if you subject them to a highly artificial experiment, you can show that Russians do have a glimmer more sensitivity to the difference between dark and light blue than either you or I do. And the only reason for that would have to be the language. It's not something about Russian culture and the color blue. There are many things like that that are fascinating in themselves, but the way it's shared with the public makes it seem as if you learn Italian, you're seeing the world in an Italian way because of the way the grammar works, because of the way the vocabulary chops up the world. And the problem with that is that there are many languages that are very, very busy, that mark every little jot and tittle of existence, and they tend to be spoken by small indigenous groups. It's very easy to see those small indigenous groups and to say, look at how sophisticated their language is. They're picking up on every little sparkle of experience in a way that, say, English, which is a relatively telegraphic language compared to those, doesn't. But the problem is then you have to look at languages like Mandarin Chinese, which is much more telegraphic than English in many ways. If you apply apply the grand old media Worfian perspective to a language like Mandarin Chinese, the Chinese end up looking kind of dim because the language marks so little. Nobody wants it to go that way. There was one unfortunate psychologist who actually tried to go that way quite innocently and is still being burned in effigy today. And he wrote the article during the Reagan administration, because the truth is that if your language doesn't have a whole lot in it, if your language has a whole lot in it or somewhere in between, the evidence is that all human beings think in basically the same way, except for these tiny shades of difference that a psychology experiment can freeze out. But that's not life itself. And so I think that people end up using Worfianism as a way to be a Westerner who shows that they understand that non-Westerners are cognitively sophisticated, which is great. But the problem is the same thing ends up insulting half of the world's people.
Okay, so you touched on the political ramifications of the hypothesis. Well, it seems, in some sense, a biologically naive hypothesis, because, I mean, we've only been speaking, evolutionarily speaking, for perhaps a couple of million years, which is a long time, but it's not that long given our 60 million year mammalian heritage, let's say, and everything that came before that, upon which our perceptual capabilities have been predicated. And so the idea that language could affect something as basic, let's say, as color perception, seems to me to be, on the face of it, quite absurd. I mean, I'm pretty convinced by the arguments, for example, that our capacity to distinguish between green and red is a consequence of our ancestry as fruit-eating primates, essentially. And
yeah.
Yes, exactly. And you can't mess around with something that deep by painting a surface of linguistic ability over the top of it. At least that's how it seems to me.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
And we all face, in many ways, regardless of where we are, the same sorts of problems. We have to get along with others. We have to eat. We have to quell our territory, let's say. And so there's a lot more that unites us perceptually and cognitively than there is that divides us.
There is. And if you really look at different languages, you see that you have to celebrate what unites us rather than what divides us, on the pain of being really anti-scientific. There are languages of New Guinea, for example, where there doesn't happen to be a difference between eating, drinking, and smoking in terms of the language. They have a word that we would translate roughly as ingest, and they use it for all of those things. Based on the Worfian analysis, they're not as sensitive to the difference between eating and drinking and smoking something as we are. And so you end up implying that they're kind of coarse, or that they're kind of crude. And if you look at the group themselves, they are as interested in food and varieties of foods and ways of cooking as we are. You find that sort of thing over and over. So I wrote The Language Hoax because it really started to stick in my craw that a lot of people end up believing this media kind of Worfianism as opposed to academic psychological Worfianism, which is, irrefutably true. And I was bemused. I'm glad that book got around more than I expected, and it seems to now be just contributing a con side to an argument there used to be only pro ones of for the general public. So we'll see how it all pans out.
So now, when you came to study linguistics, you were also extremely interested in something else you teach, American Studies. You also teach music. What element of music?
I teach. Columbia has its core curriculum where every student has to take certain courses in the kind of great books tradition. There's a music course for that. Everybody goes through one semester of the masterpieces of Western music. So what it really is good old school, quote unquote, great music, clapping for credit. It teaches you how to appreciate complex music. And the course, as you might imagine, is undergoing some changes in recent years, but it basically takes you from Gregorian chants through roughly Philip Glass, and many of us would add jazz at the end. So I had been doing that, yeah.
Are you interested in the musical element of language? Because it carries a lot of the emotional weight, right? So there's just the linguistic end, if semantic end, let's say, and you know perfectly well that you could structure the same sentence with two different intonations and mean exactly the opposite. You do that when you're being ironic. And so was your love of music, does that, what would you say, color your linguistic theorizing in any sense, or is that a separate endeavor?
No, the music loving me is a different person. And to the extent that there is music, as you're putting it, in language, that has not happened to be my area. The best person on that is Ray Jackendoff, who is somebody who actually has very good proposals against the Chomskyan idea too. But
Yes,
no,
I should talk to him. I know about him. I should talk to him. I like
Very
his work a
important
lot.
thinker,
You see
yeah.
this sculpture behind me, this thing here?
yes, yeah.
I made that 30 years ago. It's called The Meaning of Music, and it was the consequence of about a year's meditation on what it was that music was doing to us and why we were so attracted. It's such a remarkable phenomenon. I have
Weird thing, yeah.
It's a very weird thing, and I'll just run my initial hypothesis by you. And so music is often regarded as a non-representational art form. I had a great journalist up to my house this week, Rex Murphy, and he said to me, this was a quote, and I don't remember where he derived it from, that all art aspires to the condition of music,
I've heard
which is a
that, yeah.
lovely phrase. And so when I started to...
I didn't know that. This is new to me. I like that. Sound resonance. It's an important
Rational
thing.
criticism.
Might be able to
And
help
that
each
really-
other on that.
So it had this intrinsic meaning that could not be subverted by criticism. And so it struck me as something extraordinarily powerful. And I started to understand at that time that the world, in a really deep sense, is made out of nested patterns. And those patterns we perceive as objects and actions, but what they are patterns in space and time. And that music is actually the most representative form of art because it represents the harmonious interplay of patterns. And then we pattern ourselves to the music and find that, what would you say, existentially engaging in a very profound sense. So anyways,
Sure.
that's my music theory.
Oh,
for
without
what
a
it's
doubt.
worth.
And
It's true, and then even the language that we speak, like this guy's saying, I don't know who this guy is that he's talking to, but it's the same thing. What I've been saying that about the languages when we're talking, our tone of our voice, the space in between notes, when there is no, it's a silence. There used to be a poetic term for it. I don't remember. Caesarea or some shit like that. But there are philosophical terms to describe it.
Yeah, so when you listen
I
to
don't have the
great classical
language
piece, say a Bach
to
concerto or
explain it,
something
but I
like
can
that,
definitely
do you have to listen to it multiple
play
times
it
before you understand it?
and
Yes, okay, so-
seven. My rule is you don't really know it until you've heard it about 7 times. If it's challenging music, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I didn't know if that was my.
I mean, we know this
Genius, and so
that
do we
music
that length
can
of
create
exposure to get
moods,
it, but-
enhance moods to be angry or happy, and we all know this. This is
and that's becoming very old-fashioned, but that's the
pretty
only way
regular,
I can
calming music to listen
Yeah,
to
it's
something that's
amazing, too,
calming.
Asa, how you expose yourself to
Sometimes
continually
there's a
to
mixture of them in there, and there's a lot of
and then you need a
subliminal
certain
messaging
degree of
that goes on.
familiarity with it,
That's why I
and so
think
it
it's
still
important to
retains
get
some
rid of the
novelty,
zero,
then you
the
really
O,
fall
and
in
the
love with it,
circle,
and then if you listen to
and
it a
start getting rid
tremendous
of
number
those
of
things
times, in
because
some
I
sense,
believe
you
the
tend
O
to
is one of
exhaust it,
those.
although the greater
The
the
S
piece
might
of
be one,
music,
too.
in my experience, and maybe this is a marker for depth and quality in music, the greater the piece of music, the longer it takes to exhaust it.
Yeah, and if it's a really great piece of music, it's never exhausted in my experience. But yes, that's
Mm-hmm.
true. If it's an okay piece of music on the level of, say, a hot dog, you'll need 20, 21, and then you've kind of gotten past that. And you look 20 years later and you realize, wow, that fell out of the rotation, and you sort of realize why. As opposed to the things that never fall out of the rotation because it sounds so corny, but you're always finding something different, or whatever you initially found, the feeling is such a kick, it's such a mind blow that you want it over
Sure,
and over.
they
It
do that with
becomes
Christmas
church.
music.
There's almost a religious
Yes.
aspect to
Well,
it.
there is definitely that, and we can talk about that more too. One of the things I also find absolutely staggering about music is how it can have that long-lasting and gripping form in such an endless variety of genres, and how that greatness and depth can manifest itself in each of those genres, regardless of what the genre is. And it's something that's very difficult to understand. Something as simple often as, say, as country and western music, something like Hank Williams, which is very straightforward in some ways, still, to me, has that quality of inexhaustibility. And it's so...
Yeah, what amazes me, and if I were more profound about these things or more interested in bringing different parts of myself together, I would study it. It's harmony, because melody is one thing. You know, melody is a lullaby. Any human being is given that. rhythm, especially consistent rhythm, I'm sure that we are genetically programmed by accident to appreciate that. Harmony is a funny thing. And I think that people who, for one reason or another, either training or temperament or both, feel harmony and get harmony, think that all human beings hear harmony the way they do. No, it's a very odd kind of ear. And I find myself wondering, what is it about major and minor and then everything else? And the fact that if you're a music listener, you associate those things with certain feelings. You often find that other people don't have the same feelings about the ones that you do. But yeah, it's a weird thing, this thing called music. You associate a certain combination of notes with nostalgia. For me, the flatted sixth means it reminds me of the past. Why? Very interesting things. Why would it remind you of anything when it's something that didn't exist when Homo sapiens emerged? Fascinating stuff.
I had a master's student when I taught at Harvard who did her thesis on the meaning of music from a biological perspective. And one of the things she came across, and I don't remember whose thoughts these were, was that deep bass notes remind us of large animals, and high notes remind us of small animals. This is
Probably.
obviously
Sure.
a partial explanation,
Right.
obviously, and that more major tones are more maternal and comforting, and minor tones are more discordant
Cartoons
and reminiscent
use
of
those all the
emotional
time, yeah.
upset. Something. So
That feels right, exactly. Yeah.
it's so there, and it that ties in part into the emotional aspect of language itself, and all those things that we pick up
But
and
then
that
the
animals
question,
pick. Yes.
But then the question is, we quote unquote Europeans, I know it's weird for me to say that, but I think people understand. We hear major and minor and low and high that way. I wonder if an indigenous person who had never heard music like that before, let's go to Irian Jaya, it's not called that anymore, but the western half of New Guinea, somebody from there, I wonder if they would hear it that way. And I can make a guess. The low notes being associated with the elephant and the high notes being associated with the hummingbird, that's probably universal because that's true about language. O, ah is big. E is small. That's true. However, the other parts, I wonder if all of that is just arbitrary European stuff that we pick up, from starting from listening to Mother Goose songs and then it going on. I'm sure this has been studied, and I have not nosed into what those people were looking at.
Yes, probably someone knows this, and we're just ignorant about it. But so that's all fascinating. And American Studies. Now, you also were educated in American Studies, and you teach American Studies. So a very wide range of teaching interests. And so, tell me about American Studies and what you're teaching and how you got captivated by it.
Well, honestly, American Studies to me was a backdoor thing that I became passingly interested in the 80s after I got my BA, because I thought of it as a way of studying in a systematic way American popular culture of the late 19th through late 20th centuries, which obsesses me to this day. I'm a huge fan of the movies, the radio shows, the comic strips, the cartoons, the music. I could get along living in 1936, hopefully, white, but living in 1936 and knowing everything that was going on better than I think many people could, just because I enjoy it. It's not that I think 1936 was better, but I just like that stuff. And if you do American Studies, you get to read books by historians and philosophers and film scholars about those things. I got a master's degree in it at NYU at a time when the program in American Studies, for most of the people in it,
It is a shame, hearing about all these degrees and everything, You either have to be born into a family in order to be able to get anywhere. In other words, what I'm trying to do now, I'm talking about to get the word out about something. The education process, how indoctrinated we have been, it's really ridiculous to me. And I'm noticing that. Yeah, I mean, the only one I've seen without a degree, maybe a couple people, and then even them, they usually have degrees because they're reporters, so they have some kind of degree as reporters and stuff like that. But otherwise, you guys are all talking amongst yourselves, and nobody without intelligence, what you call intelligence, nobody like myself, we're not allowed to get in on anything. We're not allowed to, even though I can see everything that you guys are talking about. I understand it. I can explain it. But I'm going to be swearing. I won't have proper pronunciation of words. I'll be all over the place. I'll go back and forth and all that because it's the way my brain works. So it's just strange to me. And it's like you guys, all sides, all sides. I mean, I love listening to the things that you're interested in, but it seems like everything that we're going to go down the line with Jordan is going to be you're just missing the boat on it. And I'm not, and I don't have any right to say anything because I don't have a degree. So I won't have any. I'm gonna anyways. I'm gonna do it anyways. But and also that is I don't have a voice, so I don't have a name and I don't have a voice. So the idea of using your name and making these series to you directly is the hopes that you will come to them and give it a fair shot and look at what it is I'll be showing you throughout the series. And I usually try not to be an asshole until at least the middle or the end of the series. And with you, I was watching the videos back and I am already being a dick. So, but I don't have any choice. I mean, there's some of the shit like Elon Musk and Joe Rogan and even this guy. He seems like a really nice guy. The religions, but yeah, I'm glad that you're out there. I'm glad that you exist because at least you're talking about these things. So I'm hoping that these degrees and educations and things like that. I hope you'll hear me out and try to look at things with an open mind and not just count on these people that have these degrees, because it's hurt you guys. It's hurt you guys to have these degrees. You're not well because I keep hearing. I heard you guys say something else about the brain. How it's going to be so hard for you to come to terms with that. And it's something that I know. I'm positive. I'm 100% sure about it. The brain is a memory capsule. It's a memory chip. If we were thinking in the terms of a computer, that's all it is. So all of our bodily functions, our memories, for everything, our memories for our bodily movement, if that part, you guys in the medical industry, scientific communities, what have you guys been doing? I mean, you're like this close. Everybody is all the time. That's what's so frustrating. Like ERG and EKG machines, right? So you can hook up an ERG and an EKG, and you can watch the brain function and the heart function to find out and clearly see. The medical industry, as far as I know, has no objections to this idea that the heart is smart. They say, right? So the heart knows before the brain does, right? So if the heart, we consciously, when we talk about it, we say the heart pumps blood and doesn't have any intelligence, but then some scientists that have looked into it see that the heart is responding and sending messages in order to things before the brain does. In other words, if they've had experiments where they can hold up pictures. I'm sure you're familiar with these. You can hold up pictures to somebody, and by the time the eyes see the picture and make the determination, the heart already made the decision. So your eyes didn't even see the picture yet. If the picture hasn't even been turned around yet, and that's pretty amazing because it'll be like a bad picture and a good picture, and they'll do two or three good pictures in a row, and then a bad picture to make sure that their science is proper and everything like that. So if we know that, so we can say that the heart is smart. Then we also say that because the reason why I'm explaining this is because I'm going to be. It's not even claiming because I can show it to you. I can prove it to you. You can prove it to yourself just by going and looking and keeping an open mind that the neurological system, there's intelligence in the neurological system itself. It's an energy. It's not. We've always looked at it as maybe spiritual, and it sounds like that's how the way you're looking at it now as well is spiritual. I might as well hit play while I'm talking about nothing. You guys, I notice you, Jordan, always take it back to something spiritual happening. When we have these thoughts and these conversations with ourselves and things like that, conscious talking to the subconscious and that sort of thing, and it's very close. It's like right on the verge of a complete breakthrough of everything that I'm trying to show people. So. So the education thing is going to hurt because you're not gonna go even look at some of the things I'm telling you. All right, so the heart pumps blood, But when I go to tell you that the heart is actually a voltage regulator more than it is a pump, and we, because we're humans and have this, I can't even say too much because my fucking videos will get deleted. Okay, so the electrons and the ions that are in the blood, that are in the oxygen that are in the blood, I should say, there, that's the magic. That's the magic. The heart doesn't even actually act as a pump, right? Because if the heart stops, has problems beating and everything like that, they don't put a pump in it. They put a pacemaker in it. It's in a little electronic pulse replicator, right? That sends in a little electrical pulse to your heart. It's not a pump that's pumping air, right? It's not pumping another jot of blood into your bloodstream or anything like that. It's not working like that, right? It's just a little jolt. So, and same thing if someone has a heart attack and you throw a fibrillator on them and bring them back to life with a fibrillator, or is it a defibrillator? Defibrillator, I think it is. But anyways, you get the idea. So we can do these things. So we have the evidence all around us of what I'm claiming. Hold on. All right, I got interrupted. Hit play again. So I won't be arguing with you, even though I'm an asshole and I sound like I'm a dick because I'm frustrated. I mean, it fucking sucks, man. I mean, everybody you look to, everybody you turn around to. Today's Father's Day. Happy Father's Day, by the way. But I don't celebrate any of these ridiculous holidays, anyways. None of them. I mean, it's fucking ridiculous. Birthdays, weddings, funerals, wakes, all shit. I mean, I heard you earlier ranking out some other things and not really looking at it. And I'm going to try to give you another way of looking at some of these things because I think you will be able to do so. I think you'll be able to look at them in another way. Ranking out old cultures and other cultures and ancient cultures and everything like that. You're ranking out the Marxists, right? You don't like Marxism. And I wouldn't either. I don't either. I don't like any of them, especially now that I see everything that I see. I'm like, fuck them all, right? So you're ranking out Marxism and pointing out that 1.5 million, I believe it was, or something along those lines, people, 1.7 million, died under a Marxist leader, and that's why it was wrong, and all this kind of shit, right? And then beefing up and claiming that capitalism and conservatism is the way to go because we don't do that kind of thing. And what I want you to try to do, like the same thing I asked Candace Owens to do, and anybody that comes to my videos, I'm still waiting for fucking somebody, man. It's unbelievable. But anyways, to Jordan, step outside the box and then keep stepping outside the box and then step outside the next box and step outside and keep stepping outside these boxes because every time you look back, you're gonna realize these things that I'm telling you are true. And look with an open eye. Don't. Damn, it sucks. I mean, on one hand, it's great that you read all these books and you have all this knowledge, but on the other hand, it's all programming. And what if you can't break it? What if you can't break the programming? Then you're gonna be stuck in all this fake knowledge. And in between all that fake knowledge, little bits and pieces of truth that anybody with an open mind would be able to take those truths and put them to good use. But that doesn't seem to be happening because we've been lied to so badly. And the people that are the liars is us. That's the other shitty thing about all this. It's not like we can look to one person and say, oh, it's the Freemasons, the Illuminati, it's their fault, let's get them. It's not that easy. It's not that simple. Granted, they know a lot more than the 7.8 billion do, and they definitely play the game. But they're not at the top. Not the majority of them are not. They're not the top rulers of this earth. Those you'll probably never even know their names or anything. So it's kind of useless, right? I mean, everybody kind of knows that. So your scientific knowledge and the things that will be useful as you come and look at what it is I'm showing you. I'm going to hit play. We're just looking at some clouds. Digital collection of electromagnetic nanocarbon from the cloud level. I do this all the time. These are research vids. This is May 27th, 2022. It's going to be, this particular video is going to be on your series, Jordan. And you do is you go to the videos, play and pause, play and pause. Now, I made 5 videos earlier today, and my phone crashed again. And I was fucking pissed because, I mean, it sucks. So they were not videos like I'm doing here. They were the research vids I was doing. But I was talking to the camera a lot. I was talking about things and stuff. And then I did 3 videos. And then I looked at the camera and I'm like, something's wrong here. So I went, it locked up. So I restarted it and then all the videos were gone. Unbelievable. And this is not a phone that's even has a phone number to it. It's just a phone that I use for videos. But they get broken into, and these crazy things happen. And I'm pointing that out because I'm a nobody, you'll assume that this is nothing, and it's not worth looking at. And it is. It is. It will answer everything that you've ever wanted to know. It proves a lot of things that you're looking for evidence on and about. Unfortunately, it's going to go against most of your beliefs if they really are all beliefs. And I'm watching your face, I'm reading your energy as I'm listening to you talk, and I believe you. I believe that you're a real person. But I've been fooled a couple million other times before. So, but if you are a real person, hopefully these videos will get to you. And if you are, go and look, and you'll see it. And it'll all be explained in the visual aspect of it too. That's the thing. But back to the medical part of this, and the brain. So if the human brain is a memory capsule, and the better that capsule works, of course, but there's lots of ways of slowing it down, fucking it up. Distracting it is a big one, right? You can distract it, you can short the system out. If we look at ourselves as an electrical system, which we should, I mean, you're, again, another thing that you're like right there, you're almost like just touching on it. So our neurological system, lot of intelligence, what we would consider intelligence. You would call it spiritual intelligence. It sounds like you want to call it. It's an electrical system. They all have their own components. So I can draw you out the mirror neuron and the mirror neuron manipulator, but it's probably my drawings of it but unfortunately what's going to happen is that the medical industry is going to say that it looks different than I'm even drawing it out. I see it. I can see it. I know it sounds weird, but you will be able to see it as well. Once you go and look at the system and you see how all this is working, and the mirror neuron and the mirror neuron manipulator that I keep talking about, that's the hoarding gene. The mirror neuron manipulator is the hoarding gene. And it's the entire neurological system connected to the hoarding gene, I should say. And it's easy to see, and it's easy to see how we're using it on a daily basis for everything in our lives, because we lie about everything. Everything. It doesn't matter. I mean, so the only question is, are we purposeful liars or incidental liars? And we're incidental liars all the way up until I'm giving you the evidence, because I'm going to be showing you the evidence that you can go see for yourself. So if nobody goes and looks, then I know I'm dealing with more and more liars as I go along. So now, are they purposeful liars? Like, for example, I can't bring other people into this. People don't like that. But family and friends, let's just say, family, friends, and acquaintances, and people that I know in life, right, on a daily basis. Because I put them all through the same thing that I'm saying to you. They all go through it. I don't care how ignorant they may be or how intelligent they might be. I give it all, and they all treat it equally. So if they're in denial about it, don't I have the right to fucking say to them, Okay, well, you're a bunch of fucking liars. Then you're a bunch of liars. Purposeful liars. I'm sorry, purposeful liars. Well, I'm not a purposeful liar. Yes, you're all purposeful liars. I've been showing you the system for 5 years now. Showing it, I can show it to you. I got cameras running all the time. You got your own two eyes. We're surrounded by rocks, trees, water, ice, moon, clouds, you name it, and we can look at it all. And I can show you the feline, canine, rodent, ape, human, and beast. We can talk about the body imagery in the moon. We can put it all together. I can show, but no one will go look. They will not look. They have to be tricked into it, and then when they see it, they run from it. And that's the way it's been. I'm hoping that it'll be different with someone like yourself. I've called out some really great people. I mean, Santos Bonacci is a mathematical wizard. He's got the geocentric model down pat. The similarities in the electrical system that we live in that geocentric model, very close. But then again, so are the bits and pieces of the heliocentric model. But if there's any lies in any situation, especially when they're provable lies, that's what gets me about it all, is that all the geocentric bullshit stories and all the heliocentric bullshit stories, they're fairly easy now that it's been a few years now looking into it all, and they're fairly easy to break down and see with my own eyes that they're lying, that it's all bullshit, and it's not working the way that they're telling us. So why doesn't everybody do that? Why isn't everybody looking for themselves? They don't. No, whatever they're told on television, whatever they're told in the movies, that's what they do. So there's 46 minutes. We'll try it again on the next one.